afternoon, folks. Welcome to the Planning and Land Use Management Committee. I've been joined by the Honorable Council Member, Mr. Englander. Today is Tuesday, June 5th, 2012. We have a few items on the agenda today. Out of courtesy to my colleague, I want to make sure that we could address the item in his district. That'd be item number 2. But just real quickly, as you can tell, the acoustics are not the best. It's hard to understand in this room. So you have a conversation, it carries. So if you need to have a conversation, please take it outside. We would truly appreciate that. When you do, come up to the microphone, give us your name and address. There's a clock, a 2-minute clock there per speaker. Sometimes we go 1 minute depending on the number of speakers, but looks like the items today we can go with 2 minutes. Many of you have written very eloquent letters, but I don't know if you timed it for the 2 minutes. So you want to get to the point of your letter as quick as possible. That would be appreciated. You might find yourself come to the microphone and the previous speaker had said everything you wanted to say. It's okay to just say, I agree with the previous speaker and give us something new and or different that would help this committee do its work. So that being said, I'd like to call up Councilman Cardenas for item 2. After he speaks, we'll ask the staff to brief us on the case, but I know he is like to make his position known on this issue. Good afternoon, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So we have item 2 before yes. You. Thank you so much for the courtesy. I appreciate it. Appreciate all the work that this committee does. This committee actually deliberates quite a bit, more than perhaps most of our committees, but I do appreciate all the. And
you speak of experience, correct? You were here
yes,
for a while.
I was on this committee and glad to be under your chairmanship, and glad that you did a lot of your homework and still do. I just wanted to speak to item number 2 because it is in my district, and this is a project that has been underway for many, many years. It's a project that has gone through a litany of community meetings and hearings and deliberations, and actually outcomes from those meetings have brought it to be a very, very commendable and useful project to the community, and will certainly provide many jobs and hopefully provide a great opportunity for potential tenants who want to work in that community that truly, truly does need service of every kind. So with that, I'd like to ask that you be reminded that the developer has worked very closely with the community and my office as well, and has taken actions at the City Planning Commission. The certain actions that were taken at the City Planning Commission, we asked that the committee consider amending the determination in the following ways. One of them is that we would ask that you delete Q condition A2A. The imposition of the condition would require that the building be moved all the way to the front, abutting the public right-of-way, and while we understand the thought behind the condition, at this location it is not an appropriate condition. Moving the building forward blocks a large portion of the property from the line of sight from the street, which poses potential safety and security concerns. And we always want to make sure that we make our buildings as accessible to patrolling of LAPD, et cetera, as possible. And therefore, in the best interest of those using this property, as well as the community as a whole, we ask that the building remain in the location agreed to by our office and the community as shown in Exhibit A. In addition to that, we also would ask that you delete Q condition A2B. The Planning Commission asked for new design and architectural treatments to the building. This developer has worked with the Urban Design Unit, our office, and the community to develop the current plan. We believe that the developer has done all the appropriate work necessary to bring an attractively designed project to this property. We believe that the supplied elevations should suffice to meet the requirements of the city. In addition to that, and the final ask that I ask of this committee is that we would ask that you remove condition C22B. The applicant is more than happy to provide the required number of trees, but requiring the trees to be specifically described to be in fingerlets that extend into the parking lot will cost the project needed parking. Again, if anybody was at some of the community meetings, the community made it abundantly clear that the maximum amount of parking on site would be what the community needs and asks. And as the councilman of the district, I concur wholeheartedly. So working with our community, the parking was a major concern, as I just mentioned, and I believe that by allowing the same number of trees, but giving the developer the flexibility to place them appropriately without giving up parking would be the appropriate way to do so.
Thank you, Councilman Cardenas. Any questions, my colleagues, on the presentation? Well, thank you, sir. I know you have a busy schedule, and appreciate the input.
Yeah, today's a busy day for me. Thank
Great.
you very much.
Good for you.
Okay.
All right, sir. So that being said, we don't have any speaker cards on item 2. So let's have the staff give us a brief presentation on this item number 2. So I don't see any cards on item 2. Go ahead, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is J.K. I'm the hearing officer for this case. I'll make this brief. Project was approved for the zone change and the general plan amendment to make the entire site consistently commercial for a commercial project that is about 22,000 square feet. In doing so, as the councilman mentioned, there were several conditions that the commission had incorporated as part of its action in approving this case, and one was the A2A, as the councilman had mentioned, and that is regarding the moving the location of the building closer to Vineland Avenue, which the commission felt that it would create a more sustainable project by eliminating 2 single-loaded parking aisles and creating 1 double-loaded parking, and that's, as mentioned, A2A. And I'd just like to clarify the conditions that the commission had incorporated with respect to the councilman. Condition number A2B is actually a template standard language that is included as part of our general condition, and that was just separated as A and B, just to clarify that A was the one that was incorporated as part of the commission's action. And the other condition that the commission added was condition B20. And the councilman had mentioned it was C22B, and that is a mitigation measure that was actually that was included as part of the environmental document.
Okay, any questions, Councilmember?
No, I was just going to go ahead and with that we move to approve it with the recommended amendments per the council member of the district.
Okay, so yes.
Have a last-minute card on this.
A last-minute card. Okay. All right, folks. One card. Rob Amand, are you here? Give us your name and address, and welcome.
Sorry, it was kind of last minute there, filling it out. I agree with what the councilman said. I have another condition that I wanted to talk about, which was condition 21E, and it has to do with the height of windows. I don't know if Jay has any comments about that, but we have a Q condition that says that we can't have windows that are any lower than 72 inches in height, and that's rather high, and it's going to create dark rooms facing, it's to impose conditions so people aren't staring down their residences. But we're going to have some large trees there, and 72 inches, that's pretty high. We'll have to put skylights in to compensate, or burn more electricity for dark rooms on the back part of the office building.
Okay.
So we'd like to eliminate that condition.
Okay, well
21E.
All right. Appreciate that.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Is that 21E? Can you have the staff come on up and can you kind of shed a little light on this, so to speak?
I'm sorry.
So can you shed a little light on this?
Okay.
His reference to 21E is that part of the Q conditions?
That is actually part of the environmental mitigation measures, and
Can you,
along with condition 22B.
22B?
22B is a mitigation measure, and 21E are both mitigation measures that were not added by the commission. That was actually part of the environmental review, and that was incorporated as part of the initial staff report.
And so given his observation, what's your response in terms of his recommendation? He's saying that he wants to change the height?
That is actually something that's brought up new. In terms of, if you give me a second.
Yes.
Chairman Reyes, Terry Kaufman, Mesilla City Attorney's Office. You can't just delete an environmental mitigation measure. So if you are going to do that, you have to make certain findings and determine that there's no substantial evidence to support that and that there is not going to be an environmental impact. So you have to make certain findings before you can just do that.
Well, given the amount of analysis that's gone with this project, the council member has stated there's been several meetings at the committee level, it's been in commission. I understand the concern, but I just don't see the overwhelming need to continue this project to address those types of changes, because now to go to the findings, we have to go back to staff and continue this item. That means more time and more resources. So I appreciate the input, but it doesn't seem to be a main determining factor in dealing with the significant issues that are here. So I would second the motion to move Councilmember Englander's action, which is to support the project with the recommendations as stated by the council member. And those conditions are pretty clear and in writing, correct?
Yeah. Yes. So 4 conditions are what you're referring to, or the first 3?
The conditions stated by the council member. We have a written copy, correct? A copy of the council office's recommended changes?
Yeah.
We have that in
So
writing?
conditions A2A, A2B, and C22B. Right.
Okay, good. All right. All right. Anything else? Okay, so that would be the action of this committee. Thank you very much. All right. Mr. Legrand, would like to do the update now?
Mike Legrand for the record. There is no update from the director at this point.
God, I was on pins and needles. I thought, come on now. All right.
Make sure you vote tonight.
All right. Okay, Roberto, let's go back to number 1.
Chairman Reyes, Terry
Yes.
Kaufman, Mesilla City Attorney's Office. There was an error on the condition that the committee deleted. The C20 on the last item, C22B is an environmental mitigation measure. My understanding from staff is that the condition that was supposed to be eliminated was B20, which is not environmental mitigation. Is that correct, Jay? So if you can, in order to correct that, can you make a motion to reconsider the item and then vote on that reconsideration and then make the change and
Okay.
make the decision?
Says open it up.
Yes, we'll go ahead and motion to reconsider the item.
It's seconded. It'll be action of this committee. So now with the directives as stated by the city attorney, we can move forward on this item. For the record.
So the condition that is being deleted is C20B, no,
B20.
B20, rather than 22B, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So that's very clear now, correct? B20, not 22B. All right, that's the action of this committee.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, so item number 1, Roberto.
Item 1, council members, is a city attorney report. It's basically providing you legal developments as it relates to the issue of cell towers and the actions that were taken by the Public Works Committee.
Okay, so we can have the city attorney present the report. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. Ted Jordan, City Attorney's Office, Public Works General Counsel. And it's strange to me to be on this side of the microphone because normally I sit right there. I'm coming to this committee with a report from the City Attorney's Office responding to a motion from Council. Motion wanted to know, in light of some changes in the case law, what options were available to it to revise the way we regulate the installation of cell towers in the right-of-way. So to try to set the parameters, we're only talking about installations in the right-of-way. And the report that we submitted outlined 3 options. These options are mutually exclusive. One option, which I'll describe in a minute, was really designed to focus on the heart of what the issue is, which is an area that we do not regulate. So we wanted to close a loophole. There were 3 options in total. In the Public Works Committee, recently, we actually discussed a 4th option in the spirit of the original motion from Council to talk about what tools are available. We realized there's an additional tool, and so I believe all of those were captured in the Public Works Committee's notes. Briefly, the options that are available would be to, 1, remove an exemption in the current above-ground facilities ordinance for regulating wireless telecommunications facilities that are installed on utility poles. Utility poles are defined in the ordinance as essentially a pole that supports a transmission wire. Think of it as what you might think of as a telephone pole or a DWP power pole. Those poles that carry transmission wires currently are used to install cellular telephone antennas, or antennas, and we do not regulate that. So the first time that you know about that antenna is when you see it. So the recommendation would be to remove that exemption from the AGF ordinance, meaning any antenna of that type installed on a utility pole would go through the AGF ordinance process, which includes notification to the public, notification to the council office, and, if necessary, a hearing before the Board of Public Works. The second option, again, these are mutually exclusive, is to look at the notification pattern that we have in the ordinance. Right now, when a cell tower or a cabinet is to be installed in the right-of-way, there's a notification made to the adjacent property owner, the properties on either side, the abutting property owners, and the people across the street. It's property owners, not necessarily tenants. So looking at what other cities have done, there is a trend to sort of broaden that notification pattern. It's not really the primary problem that led us to look into this, but it is an option that's available to the City Council to increase the regulation. There are a variety of ways that can be done. It can be a radius of notification, which, however big you draw that radius, may pull in people that are on different streets, people that don't necessarily see the cell tower. You could expand it linearly so that it's a certain number of feet or hundreds of feet along the street, so maybe you get more than just the adjacent and abutting property owners, but you get, other people on the street. Another way to expand the notification is, even if you leave it with adjacent property and abutting, is to include a notification to owners and occupants. There may be situations where there's an apartment building and there's a desire to get notification to the occupants. We'd have to figure out how to do that, because right now property owner notifications are easy. They can do it based on ownership records, which are publicly available. Occupants would require a little thought, but if people that send out junk mail can get occupants, I'm confident it can be done here too. But these are again options for the council to decide as a policy. The third option that we talked about in our written report would be to enhance the aesthetic criteria. What got us thinking about this was some case law a number of years ago where the courts were in disagreement as to whether or not we can regulate these sites based on their aesthetics. Federal law and state law gives telecommunications companies the right to install their equipment in the right-of-way. The open question at that time was whether you could regulate it based on aesthetics. The federal court has answered that question, and it says that you can. We actually have aesthetic regulations already, but those could be enhanced. They could differentiate residential areas and commercial areas. Again, these are options or tools that are available to the City Council. If there were specific issues that the Council wanted the Board of Public Works to look at, we could include those in a list so that they shall consider, among other things, and then have a list of things that the Council wanted. After we submitted the written report, we realized there was a fourth tool available that some cities have availed themselves of, and that is to provide some type of time element to a permit. The current ordinance says that once the permit is issued, it basically remains in place unless the facility has been abandoned. And if there's a safety issue, we could probably look at it. But from a basic standpoint, these permits, once they're issued, go on forever, and as long as that facility is being used. What some cities have done is they've imposed a strict time limit. That would go from one extreme to the other. The extreme of having no limit to the extreme of having a fixed time limit, and after that, the permit would no longer be in effect, and you'd have to reapply to get that right. I think there's room in the middle to provide a more balanced approach. Again, if the Council wanted to address this issue. A balanced approach maybe would allow for the city to reopen a site after, say, 10 years, and there's a state law that talks about anything less than 10 years as being presumptively unreasonable.
Just for clarity, yes, if I could, because you're talking about the tools and the options available, and I see where you got into enhance existing aesthetics criteria on number 3, but now you're talking about time issues and certainty, and I don't see that covered in the report.
That fourth element that I'm talking about was an issue that we brought to the Public Works Committee as part of our consideration of the report. It was not.
Do you have anything written on that?
I do not have anything written on that. I'd be happy to send something to your office and talk to you about that. It was something that we realized was an additional tool available to the Council. I'm trying to describe it to you here as fully
if you
as I
could walk
can.
us through it just once again, so because I didn't see it in the documents that I read.
Absolutely.
And that's what it's new information.
And I'll take the blame for not including that in the report.
Right, that's okay.
Right now, we don't have a time limit on these permits. Once they're issued, and as long as you're using that site, you do not need to come back to the city to ask for permission again. That's one end of the extreme. The other end would be to say your permit will be valid for a fixed number of years, say 10. After 10 years, that permit has expired, and if you wish to continue using that site, you need to come to the city, reapply, and go through all of the process all over again. I'd like to talk about those two because that sort of brackets the two ends of the spectrum. What I'm talking to you now is about sort of being in the middle and looking at this from a more balanced standpoint, where after a certain fixed amount of time, the city could then reopen that in response to, say, issues that might be raised by the public, if there's a changed technology, so what made sense 10 years ago doesn't make sense today. If there's some other factor that's come up, it would allow the city to at least reopen that and consider whether or not the decision we made 10 years ago remains to be the right decision today. So it wouldn't necessarily be a fixed expiration, but it would be more than just the once it's issued, it's there forever. So that would be the sort of a fourth tool available to the Council. Again, to reiterate, these tools are all mutually exclusive, and these are, we bring these to you as the policymaking body to decide what we want to do. Keeping in mind the reason that we're here, the reason that people wanted to talk about cell towers and ask us these questions, what can we do to regulate them, was because of the big gaping hole in our regulation, the gaping hole for utility poles, the thing that we don't regulate. These other options I bring to you because they are tools available, and it's up to the Council to decide, how far do we want to go. We could close a loophole and leave the other items untouched and then bring utility poles into the same regulation that we already have and see how that works. If there remain to be problems, we could readdress that in the future. Or we can take a stab at a holistic approach and revise the entire ordinance, fix the thing that's broken on utility poles, and then try to improve what we already have. And I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Well, thank you for that presentation. What we'll do is we'll go through the cards, and then we'll bring you back. If we have any other questions and issues, and I do have a couple of points I just want to clarify with you once we go through public comment cards.
Okay, if I may add one more thing, and I would be remiss if I didn't bring it up. keep in mind, as we talk about expanding the regulation, particularly if we talk about bringing utility poles into the ordinance structure, these permits are processed by the Bureau of Engineering, and depending on the permit, there can be a substantial amount of work. So if the council chooses to close that loophole, bring utility pole installations into the ordinance structure, it may be that there's going to be additional staffing requirements necessary at the Bureau of Engineering in order to process what we would expect to be an increased number of permits. I don't have any data on what they would need to do because it would depend on the volume of applications. Some of these things could be covered by permit fees, but I just want to put it out there as an issue, but I don't have any solid information on that at this time.
I understand, but I'm aware that because they become new candidate sites for the industry, that our constituents are going to be seeing more and more changes that will alarm them as to impact. And I'm hesitant to bring this up, but for years, ever since Councilman Burnson was here dealing with co-locating, the biggest issue that always arose was the health issue, which we cannot engage because of FCC federal regulations. And that tends to be the most emotional button that gets pushed, and we are asked to address it when legally we don't have any jurisdiction over the health issue. So it's not part of the toolbox that you have presented because of federal law. And but that being said, it does behoove the city to figure out how to respond to our constituents when these new candidates on these utility poles become controversial because of the general public's they're unaware of what we can and cannot do.
Yes.
And so we do have to figure out how to inform our constituency and be strategic in not hurting the industry, but also make everyone aware of our notion of accountability. We have to be accountable to their calls and their concerns. So you're right, it's a balancing act, but we have to figure out the best approach to address this issue. But I appreciate what you have done for us, because now we have a way to close a major loophole and set a methodology in place that allows us to inform our constituents.
Thank you.
So that being said, let's go through the public comment cards, and we'll take it one step at a time. So our first speaker is Lupita Cornejo. I'm sorry, Lupita Sanchez Cornejo. And then Nancy Friedman.
Good afternoon, Chairman Reyes, council members, Huizar Englander. My name is Lupita Sanchez Cornejo, and I proudly represent AT&T External Affairs in the LA area. Thank you for allowing me to come before you to speak on a critical issue, the pending ordinance of the wireless industry in the city. I would like to tell you a little bit about the critical service we provide, our work in the community, and the resources we bring to the city. The way Californians and Angelenos use wireless devices has changed in dramatic ways. Technology has evolved, and we use wireless devices to watch movies, read newspapers, read books, listen to music, testify before elected officials, and consume other media. In the last 5 years, wireless data on AT&T's network has seen a dramatic increase of over 20,000%. The Nielsen Company recently released their findings of the state of the Hispanic consumer, and they have seen a dramatic increase in the use of cell phones by Latinos, families accessing the internet solely through their smartphones. 44% of African Americans and Latinos use smartphones. 88% of all American adults have a cell phone. 63% of American adults go online through their wireless device. And more and more, we are starting to see our small businesses rely on wireless devices like never before to conduct their business, as high as 96%. And then another critical component, we have seen more and more Californians rely on their smartphone for an emergency capacity and issues. And a lot of them say that they have been saved by having access to their wireless device. AT&T's commitment to innovation, excellence, and LA began more than 100 years ago. After leaving the city of LA, I joined AT&T and was very impressed with our commitment to the community and the city that we live in. Can I take 10 seconds to just wrap up?
Can just finish?
You've seen our commitment, you've seen our numbers, and you've seen what we do in the city in terms of investing in our infrastructure. I have handouts I'd like to share with you because it's important to showcase that we are building an infrastructure that all of us enjoy, and so I hope that you will consider all this when you craft your ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nancy Friedman, come on up.
Good afternoon. Nancy Friedman, 165 Homewood Road, Brentwood. I'm the chairman of the Brentwood Community Council. I'm just going to read you a little quick thing. I'm representing our
Just keep your eye on the clock.
Oh. That's okay.
Okay.
I'm representing our side of town, and we were at the meeting last month at Public Works to talk and to see what we could do as far as a balancing act, which you've been presented. And the bottom line in our mind is that the Los Angeles community has been waiting for action on this item for many months, and it's our understanding, and that's what we want to understand, that the Assistant City Attorney Ted Jordan's recommendation is to have the council direct the city attorney to draft an ordinance for consideration by the council, consistent with Mr. Jordan's previous report and testimony to the Public Works and now the Plum committees. We strongly support the recommendation and encourage you to move the item swiftly to City Council for a vote. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Yigay Al-Kashishian, come on up.
Good afternoon. Yeri Kishishan, representing the Central City Association of Los Angeles. CCA, speaking on behalf of our 450 members, which collectively employ over 350 individuals throughout the region, would respectfully ask this committee work with the wireless industry to provide optimal wireless services to all of us who are increasingly reliant on it for everything that we do. We have all experienced firsthand the increased demand for wireless service. More people and businesses are going wireless, and more are using this technology for data-intensive uses. Businesses today are especially reliant on the use of wireless devices and other data-intensive uses for their individual needs. We believe that the City Council can partner with the wireless service companies to find common ground on how to proceed with the recommendations from the City Attorney's Office without resorting to undue regulations. In the end, the wireless industry providers and the city share a common goal: to ensure that the residents and businesses alike have access to reliable and enhanced services, in addition to ensuring that our networks keep pace with the current surge in demand. To succeed in this regard, however, the city must work alongside the existing providers to ensure that our businesses and residents alike have a better wireless experience, one with reliability, enhanced service, and fewer dropped calls. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Anita Q. Gabrielian. Good afternoon.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Reyes and members Weezar and Englander. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to share comments on behalf of AT&T. The existing and growing demand for wireless service is unprecedented, and this type of service depends on significant infrastructure investments and upgrades to meet that demand. Over the last 10 years...
Just move your microphone closer to you. There you go.
Right there?
There you go.
Over the last 10 years, companies such as ours have been able to build their networks and serve our customers, your constituents, subject to the regulations of the AGF ordinance. The AGF ordinance was a result of years of time and effort by city staff, community leaders, business organizations, and the telecommunications industry. Now that the wireless networks are ubiquitous, we recognize the need for expanding the AGF ordinance to include the placement of wireless facilities on utility poles in the public right-of-way. I never thought I would say that, but yes, it's here. I urge the committee, though, in while they're upgrading this ordinance, to please apply the same AGF regulations that have worked well for the wireless facilities on utility poles, to maintain the exemption for street light poles designs, and they have enjoyed the support of neighborhood organizations as well as the Bureau of Street Lighting, and to remove any language that imposes a time-specific term on AGF permits for wireless facilities. This would add unnecessary uncertainty to the decision to invest in critical wireless infrastructure. We remain committed to working with you to ensure that we are able to provide residents and businesses with the wireless service they expect and demand for all the different uses that you've already heard, not just watching television, etc., but for seeking jobs and applying for college, ordering books, etc., telemedicine. And we look forward to continuing to work with the local neighborhoods to find optimal solutions. Please, no moratoriums or ICOs. This would cripple an industry and hurt all Angelenos. I applaud the City Council's recent motion to improve the city and technology sector and create jobs for Angelenos, and so please craft an ordinance that does that and embraces and continues to help the industry provide what your constituents need. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Norman Cullen? Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. Norman Cullen here for Councilman Bill Rosendahl, your colleague, and we are supportive. When this process began, when Councilman Rosendahl was chair of Public Works, and we've attended the last Public Works meeting, and as Mr. Jordan recommended, we support those recommendations as modified at Public Works and with the broad notice that was discussed today, and to bring that forward to Council, and we thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker is Jessica Duboff.
Good afternoon. My name is Jessica Duboff. I'm here on behalf of the Los Angeles Area Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber represents 1,600 organizations of all sizes, including hundreds of small businesses. For many of these companies, quality wireless service is critical to maintaining and growing business. They rely on broadband services to communicate with customers, vendors, and other clients daily. As has been mentioned by numerous speakers, the demand for wireless services has been growing at a pace that even those in the industry couldn't have predicted. Wireless associations report that roughly 1 in 5 traditional U.S. landline users have switched to wireless only, and that rate is increasing exponentially. Wireless infrastructure is expensive to maintain and upgrade. When wireless carriers build or improve a network cell site in a community within a city like Los Angeles, they are investing capital to improve the infrastructure that directly benefits the public and our ability to communicate in the 21st century. In return for this capital investment, a city should adopt reasonable rules that govern the placement and operation of wireless facilities. The Chamber urges the Council to adopt a wireless ordinance that allows carriers to make the necessary upgrades in infrastructure to provide optimal coverage in all of our business corridors, open spaces, and residential neighborhoods. We hope you will continue to work with the wireless providers and the community to adopt an ordinance that is practical, fair, and reasonable in bringing this vital service to the public. Thank you.
Thank you. That was speed reading. That's 45 seconds short. That's pretty good. Doug Arsenault? Doug? And then Christopher Coons. Good afternoon, sir.
Thank you. Good afternoon, council members. My name is Doug Arsenault of the Valley Industry and Commerce Association, VICA. We represent more than 370 businesses in the city of Los Angeles and surrounding communities that have created over 100,000 jobs. VICA recognizes that cellular service coverage is critical for the residents and businesses of Los Angeles. The unprecedented and explosive growth of wireless broadband usage in the past few years requires increased bandwidth for personal and business communication. In the last year alone, smartphone user data consumption has seen 89% growth in the last year, with increased use of devices such as the iPhone and Android. These users are business leaders and customers for neighboring businesses. More coverage means more tower construction, and the wireless service providers are doing so responsibly in accordance with the city's zoning code. They encourage and engage community leaders, including neighborhood councils, city council members, and individual property owners when proposing wireless locations. These antennae are revolutionarily different from the traditional eyesores. They include incorporating elements such as screening antennas from public view and painting them to match the exterior of the building, which allows for seamless integration into the urban landscape. We encourage you to maintain support for the wireless industry industry and do what is right for the overall residential and business communities that depend on wireless coverage. Thank you.
Mr. Coons, next speaker, final speaker.
Good afternoon, Christopher Kuntz on behalf of Councilman Paul Koretz. It's been a couple of years since this motion first went in, and we do thank the city attorney for their work, and I just wanted to urge us to move forward in developing an ordinance that will just give us a more fair, open process. I think in all of your offices you've experienced issues where either something goes up and no one knew about it, and that's even if we would have approved it under an open process, for that to happen to a constituent is not a good outcome and is not easy to explain. The other thing we have under our current system, someone will get a notice in the mail and it'll show a picture of a box, but what the notice is for installing a new antenna on the pole. But since we don't regulate the pole, but we regulate the box on the sidewalk, it's this very confusing system. We think some good work's been done. We think that staff will develop a great ordinance, and we ask you to move forward on it.
Okay. So that concludes public comment on item 1. Any questions, colleagues, or issues that we want to bring up to the city attorney who has submitted the report? Come on up, city attorney. And I believe Councilman Rizzo has some questions, and if he asks my questions, I won't have to ask mine.
So what we're approving today is just some direction to go back and draw the ordinance, correct?
It's a directive.
We're requesting that the report go to the full council. I can make the same presentation if necessary. We would ask that the committee recommend that the council instruct the city attorney to revise the ordinance with the appropriate direction that the council as a whole would see fit to incorporate 1, 2, 3, 4, or all 4 of the recommendations, or any others that the council would see fit. So what we ultimately seek is the instruction from the city council to prepare the ordinance revision. The ordinance itself would then go back to the council for approval.
So have you gone through Public Works already?
We've been through the Public Works Committee already, yes.
Okay. So would this come back here, or would this go to council after the ordinance? We're going to ask that it come back to the committee?
I was going to ask to bring it back. If, Madam Attorney, if they complete all of the objectives of this committee, we would have to review it one more time, I think. As much as I don't want to hold it, I'd move it as fast as possible. I think we should get this in the books as soon as possible as well. So that would be a prerogative, right? We have the ability to do that.
Terry Kaufman Macias, can you repeat what?
To return, the question is, would it come back here, or would it go straight to council? And
well, this is just a report that's in front of you today, so that report is going to council. But you could request that after council gives its instruction, if you want to see that ordinance, you could ask to see it, but it's not, as I understand it, amending anything that's in the zoning code. So it's not exactly within your jurisdiction.
Right. So,
excuse me, Mr. Chair. At this point, what is before the Public Works Committee as well as before the Planning and Land Use Committee is just the report. And if your committee concurs with the Public Works Committee, this matter will be scheduled for council, and one of the recommendations is to request the city attorney to prepare an ordinance. The city attorney will prepare an ordinance and will submit it for council consideration, and the ordinance will be referred back to committee, and the committees can either formally approve it or waive consideration and then schedule the final ordinance to council. So the ordinance will go to committee once it's submitted.
Great. Okay, that's
Terry Kaufman Macias. It may come back, but depending on how it's structured, it may not be a land use matter at that point. So we can just leave it for after it's drafted.
So, got it. I just want to know the process. So this will come back at some point to committee. On the notification So what do you plan to draft up in the ordinance right now? What's the direction you feel you have so far?
Well, we have as one of our recommendations to revise the notification. I've tried to describe what the current notification is, as well as what some of the other options would be.
Yeah.
If the council wanted to provide a very specific direction, we could adopt that. If the council wanted us to I think that the language in the Public Works after the most recent Public Works Committee was, I think they said to expand it. We could do that by including that notification be made to owners and occupants that would capture apartment dwellers.
Yeah.
We could expand it so that it's not just the adjacent and the abutting and the people across the street, that it could be a certain, 200-300 feet, 500 feet, I think, is the most that we typically do in a land use thing, but sometimes there are smaller areas of notification. It could be a linear distance, so it's down the street. If you draw a big circle around a site, you're going to capture people that are on other streets that might not even have a direct line of sight to the cell tower. A lot depends on how specific you want to be with your instruction. If the instruction isn't very specific, we will put in an enhancement to the notification and bring that back to council, and when it's in the committee, we can discuss the pros and cons of what we presented.
Yeah. I just want to make sure that whatever impacts we're talking about, that's the people who get notified. I mean, if we do a radius and we cover a whole neighborhood and we're trying to deal with impacts of aesthetics, maybe the issue is line of sight for the area. I mean, that would make more sense. I do agree, however, that it's not only property owners, but perhaps tenants, somehow get tenants to be aware of this. But we want to improve the notification system, but not make it too expensive that we're not dealing directly with what the impacts are of what people may be concerned about a new cell tower going up. So that's kind of my take on that. And secondly, on the time limit for the permit, now, one of the issues I'm grappling with is that I want to make sure we're consistent, right? What type of permit is this? Do similar types of permits, do they have time limits? Should we have a time limit or not? I just want to make sure that we're being consistent with other types of permits that we give out, similar utility types of permits that we're keeping within the same time frame. Can we categorize this as any type of particular permit that it would fall under some category and therefore make sense to do a certain time limit or not, depending upon what we've been doing in the past?
That's an excellent question. On other types of utilities that are below ground, those are done through, like for example, the gas company has a franchise agreement where they install their equipment, but that's for them installing it below ground. The franchise agreement has a fixed time. I think in fact, it's coming up this year. It expires, I believe, after 20 years.
20 years.
And there'll be a negotiation. But that's the gas line franchise that the city has. Cable franchises, which we are no longer the franchising authority. We used to be, the City of Los Angeles, the cable franchising authority. Those were for a fixed period of time, and then there'd be negotiations to award new cable franchises. This above-ground facilities permit is, I look at it as somewhat a different animal. I don't have a good, really analogous type of permit. I'm not entirely familiar with the conditional use permits that are granted, but again, these are a bit different than when we issue a conditional use permit for a facility of this type on private property.
Yeah. Well, there's some investment that the utility will have to make, and they would do a cost-benefit analysis saying, well, this is too short of a time, why would we even look into this when there might be some discretion exercised and pulled from us? And at the same time, we do want an opportunity to review for compliance and that everything's there. So we have to balance those interests. So in that respect, I just want to make sure we don't put too much short of a time. And if we do one, and secondly, if we do a time period, how is it consistent with other types of permits that we've allowed? Is it 10? Is it 15? Is it 20? I don't know what that would fall under. So I just think we might want to look at that to see what would make sense.
If the council were to instruct us to put a time element into the ordinance, we could certainly bring that back to the council along with the ordinance, so that what we have is can be looked at in the context of what other permits that we have.
And I still need to flesh that out. If we do put a time period, what's the rationale? And secondly, other permits that we do allow, that we don't, I mean, would it fall under any of the, is it similar to other permits that we're allowing right now that don't have time permits? And why would we justify giving this a time sensitive, I mean, give it a time limit? So I'm still trying to grapple with that, just so that we could stay consistent.
I understand. In terms of what time limits there are, the government code in California has been cited to our office by the industry as providing a limit. We haven't fully explored that, but on its face, the government code in California talks about a 10-year limit. If anything less than 10 years, the government code describes as being presumptively unreasonable. The city of San Francisco, in their recently enacted ordinance, had a 2-year time limit which can be renewed up to 4 times in 2-year increments. So they get to 10 years, but they do it in these 2-year increments. They've actually been sued and are defending their ordinance now based on that government code section that talks about anything less than 10 years as being presumptively unreasonable. So that would just be, I only bring that out is to educate the council as to what a time limit could be and what has happened when a city has gone below that time limit.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, my final point on that is I just want to make sure that we're consistent with other permits that we give out that may or may not have time limits. And if we do one here, what's the rationale? It has to be a pretty good one to do it.
And we would absolutely take a look at that.
That's a good one.
Okay.
I think we're going by term limits now. Councilor Englander.
I have several questions.
I can hear you better with your mic off, actually.
Yeah, probably.
Because those speakers create a standing wave right at my ears.
Just some questions on the AGFs. In going through this, number one, when we talk about the utility poles and streetlights, are we specifically talking about existing poles, or if a cell company comes in and proposes a new cell tower or utility pole strictly for cellular connection, is there a difference? Do we separate out the two?
Yes, that's a good question. Let me address it in parts. The exemption itself in the current ordinance is for streetlight mounted and utility poles. What we're talking about in our recommendation is just really more focused on utility poles. So if you wanted to have something mounted on a street light, right now the exemption is still there, and we're somewhat comfortable with that because those locations have worked well. In terms of the utility pole, if there is an existing utility pole again is defined as a pole that carries transmission wires. If there is an existing pole and equipment is to be installed on that pole, it's currently exempt. We would recommend in the report or as the option that exemption would no longer be there. So you'd have to go get a permit. If a brand new utility pole were to be installed in an area, again, utility pole is a pole that supports transmission wires, then currently, once that brand new utility pole is installed, all of the other cell equipment and things that you hang on it are within the exemption.
But the question is you say could, I know it's splitting hairs, but could carry transmission on it. That doesn't mean that a new pole actually has that, just because it has the ability. So
okay, perhaps I misunderstood. On a freestanding pole.
Okay.
Those are characterized as a monopole. So remember, antennas need to be up high because it's a line of sight broadcast. If a new pole is to be installed in an area, whether or not there are utility poles there or not, if that pole is going to be a freestanding pole that's not supporting transmission wires, we currently regulate that, and they go before the board. The exemption,
even though it has the ability to carry transmission wire, it has
correct.
To already have transmission wires
correct
fixed to it.
You could have a wooden freestanding pole, have an antenna on it. That pole theoretically could carry transmission wires, but it isn't. So therefore, it's not a utility pole.
Okay. And then and you stated a second ago that there is a height two other things on the height. One is, what about the boxes that were being installed a few years ago that were at 4 or 5 feet off the ground in some cases, and by some of the utilities that they were saying that complied with AGF. It was affixed, it was cellular in nature, and it was affixed to the pole. But not only was it an eyesore, but it was also a danger. And I don't know if this deals with that or what we ever did to regulate that. I believe those were installed by Verizon at the time, if I recall correctly.
Yes, I didn't want to name the company, but I'm very
I don't mind
familiar.
naming the company.
You did, I didn't. Yes, it was. They were Verizon boxes. They were for the FiOS system. Because the current AGF ordinance exempts facilities mounted on utility poles, those boxes that were installed on utility poles were exempt from the ordinance. The Board of Public Works became aware of them because the poles were the boxes were installed on the pole, in some cases around 5 or 6 feet high, and the boxes were fairly large and they stuck out. So the authority of the Board of Public Works was to essentially keep the right-of-way safe from obstructions, and because those boxes were installed at a point where they could be hit by pedestrians walking by, those boxes were literally moved up the pole. When they got past, and I think it was about 10 feet or so, and it was just really just a compromise, there it was felt that those boxes were no longer creating an obstruction in the right-of-way. They were allowed to remain on the pole because at that time we were not regulating those installations. So they, as far as I know, remain on those utility poles, but they are just at a higher location now.
And we have no regulation on those types of boxes now, or height?
We do not currently regulate those installations on the utility poles in the AGF ordinance. Where it became an issue was because those boxes were installed so far down the pole, they created a safety obstruction in the right-of-way. Even though we don't regulate them under the AGF ordinance, they still came within the purview of the Board of Public Works because they were creating an unsafe condition in the right-of-way.
Right. Okay. And this ordinance, though, would not address that issue either, or this would?
If we were to remove the exemption for utility poles in the AGF ordinance, we could remove the exemption for wireless communication facilities on utility poles, which are the antennas, usually mounted at the top, in which case the Verizon-type FiOS box would still not be regulated. If we remove the exemption for utility poles to include wireless communication facilities or other video franchise, cabinets, perhaps we could define a certain size. Right. Then we could capture within the ordinance boxes of the type that you're talking about.
Now, I know on the cellular, and I know we have a long agenda, so I'll try to be pretty quick. But I know on the cellular structures, if they affix those to city facilities, there's a fee. I don't know if every deal is structured the same or not, but there's a fee that the city collects, either in some type of a rental fee or something, as private parties do as well, when they put cellular equipment on buildings and structures. What do poles generate any type of revenue for cellular equipment?
When they're installed on the DWP utility poles, they're done through the operation of the joint pole agreement that the DWP, well, really it's the city of Los Angeles, along with other utility companies and other municipalities. I don't believe that there's any significant revenue generated from that. It would be an issue that we'd probably want to talk to DWP to see about what, if anything, the fees are that they collect through the joint pole agreement. My understanding is that if there is, it's not much, but I don't want to speculate any further because I don't think. Keep in mind, it's different, however, than when we allow someone to install their equipment on private property, where we can enter into some type of lease type agreement where they're literally paying us rent to have their equipment on our property or on our rooftop.
Okay. Well, if somebody can report back to me on that directly, I don't know what that we need as part of the report, and then
we can certainly do that.
Just a couple other quick questions as well. On the denial on number 3, the enhanced existing aesthetic criteria, we've got here that there could be a denial process of an application due to adverse aesthetic impacts. Would those be structured differently for each and every application, if you will, or would we have a city guideline of a design or some type of community design where that would fit each community, or would this be a citywide checkoff list or a process to say we can deny it based on certain aesthetics, and we take it case by case, or how would that work?
Well, we already regulate this in our existing ordinance, not for the utility poles because they're exempt, but on everything else we do. And aesthetics come in a variety of ways. Any pole or cabinet that is installed in the right-of-way under the existing ordinance that design of the cabinet or pole must be approved by Cultural Affairs. So, and their review would include their aesthetic criteria or their judgment. Depending on where the location is to be installed, if it's in an area that is where there exists a design review board, because maybe there's a specific plan or some other element like that, which I know this committee is very familiar with, we also ask that they get the approval of the design review board. They could say no, in which case the application has to be, basically redone or altered until you get that approval. When it comes to the Board of Public Works, there's also sort of on a case-by-case basis an examination of where the antenna or the cabinet is to be installed, and there is frequently on the sites where there is opposition an effort by the staff and the impacted communication company along with the residents to go out to the site and look at the location and come up with these ways to address the aesthetic criteria. Sometimes sites are moved. Sometimes the site, the application is withdrawn and another location is selected. The existing ordinance provides the aesthetic elements. We could enhance that and provide for more specific types of criteria to look at. If we have more specific types of criteria, when the board takes an action to deny a site, we could be referring to those more specific criteria. They could be dependent upon the area. So if it's a residential area, it's different than in an industrial area.
You had said that earlier, residential versus industrial or business area, but it's not spelled out on the report. So
Correct. I'm just trying to sort of spell out some additional detail.
Okay. And then lastly on that, just two other quick things. One on the height, back on the height issue. If it's an existing utility pole that has, it's a live pole, in other words, that has feeds to it. What if they either removed and replaced that same pole and just went higher up? Is that allowed now by right, or if they just added on to the existing pole and went higher than the pole would be now? Is that currently allowed?
In fact, that happens quite often, and that's a source of many of the complaints that we hear about, and I'm sure you do as well. Because we don't regulate the utility poles, and we do not permit the installation of the utility poles, when an existing utility pole is removed and replaced with a taller pole, there was no permit for that, because we don't permit those utility poles.
I'd like to see, if I could then, on this, a couple recommendations. Well, let me ask one more question, I'm sorry. On the time limit issue you're talking about, if, in fact, and you mentioned technology could change, and it very well could, and probably will, and at some point in our lifetime, we won't have any need for cellular antennas anymore. At some point, they'll be either embedded, God knows where, or they will be shot into space, and there'll be satellite systems, and all of our phones won't be utilizing the technology. Do we have any... and then we'll be stuck with all this blight and these antennas all over the place that'll be abandoned, or if these certain companies might go out of business for whatever reason and they're abandoned, do we have any bonds or anything else, or anything set up as a deposit where we would be able to take them down if we couldn't go after the companies that abandon their property on our locations, on our poles? What have we set up in place? There will be some point in time, no matter whether there will be a point in time that will no longer use cellular antennas. It's inevitable. Don't know when that is, but at some point these cellular antennas will be abandoned. What have we done have we done anything to prepare for that?
That's a good question. I don't know if we collect any kind of bond that is held for that eventual contingency, but the existing ordinance that we have, and once we get into this ordinance, we're going to take a look at the entire ordinance and fix anything that needs to be fixed. The current ordinance, however, does provide that if a facility is abandoned, then the applicant is required to remove that.
If the applicant was still in business.
If the applicant were still in business, that's correct.
Okay, I think I'd like to see that addressed as well. But if we could, colleagues, if we can move this on to council, I'd have those two recommendations that we address that as well, and the height issue, that if it's an existing pole, that we come up with something that if the height's going to be extended, that it's not automatically by right, that there's some other type of approval, if we can look at that. And then I'd also ask that should an ordinance be drafted and approved by, or be drafted by, instructed by council to be drafted, to the city attorney, that whatever draft ordinance that come back to at least both committees as well, Public Works and Planning. And that way that's a recommendation coming out of Planning to go to the council.
And I would support that recommendation. And colleagues, I think you've hit all the critical issues that's before us. This essentially is a directive to request that the city attorney to prepare and present the ordinance. I think the key issue to me is, several are. One, the timing issue of how long the permits can last. I think the 10-year threshold established by the state gives us enough cover to be consistent with state law and allows us to project the type of concerns in case industry technology doesn't change, where different types of equipment and or less obtrusive equipment can be identified at the 10-year point. We can trigger those types of changes. Or if they're not needed at all because of technology, we can take them down. But we can at least assess that at the 10-year point and then follow state law. And we can include that in the report, that analysis. I would very much appreciate that. The other issue of folks who should be notified, I would strongly suggest and recommend not only the property owner but the occupant of the surrounding area. The points my colleagues made, I think, are very relevant as to who gets notified. I would follow the observation where we look at sight lines, looking at 200 feet. Might not be necessary for the 500, but 200 feet, you're talking about maybe 3 to 4 houses in a row that are impacted by the presence of this facility. The issue of ground-up community participation when these permits are being triggered, my assumption is that once the notification is made, that therein lies the opportunity for the council office and the community advocates to engage the applicant to talk about what is the most compatible when it comes to aesthetics, and that would be a process that I think everyone could benefit from. It might be a little bit more arduous, like you said, might require more personnel, but I think it's something that's well worth engaging when we look at the permit process. But I think we've covered all the issues here, and are we ready for the action?
Yeah, and just to be clear, this is coming back to committee at some point after we're drafting it.
Once we prepare a draft ordinance, the draft ordinance will be transmitted to the city council, and then that ordinance and then will be coming back to any committees that, are seen fit.
So we would concur with the Public Works Committee and request the city attorney prepare and present the ordinance with the recommended changes and observations made by my colleagues, and that would be the action of this committee. Are we okay, Roberto?
Actually, what you're recommending is the recommendations in the city attorney report and approving those options.
Okay.
Because you don't have an ordinance before you.
Okay, so that's just like you said it.
Yeah.
All right. So that's what we'll move. Well, thank you very much. That takes care of this item. And thank you, City Attorney, for your hard work. Thank you, sir. And it'll come back. Roberto, next item?
The next item, council members, is a planning commission report. It includes an appeal relative to a conditional use for a private high school in CD3. And the appeal was filed by Christine Rowe.
Okay, we have a lot of cards on this item. Let's have the planning report. Planning staff, come to the microphone, please.
Good afternoon, committee members. My name is Nick Hendricks, Department of City Planning. I'll be brief in my introduction. Originally, this case was approved by the Commission in March. The resulting recommendation for the approval is based upon a number of years of community outreach, a number of conditions that were crafted to try to meet the community's concerns. A traffic study was performed. A traffic mitigation transportation plan has been implemented. It's been approved and reviewed by Department of Transportation. We believe that the conditions that we have imposed on this project right now will satisfy many of the concerns of the community, and we also have them coming back to us in 24 months so that we can see how these conditions are performing, to see if the performance standards are adequate, and we may modify those in the future to kind of fit the community and whatever particular concerns that may still linger after that time. As far as that is concerned, I think that we're okay with the existing conditions as they are, and if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go through public comment. Do we have any public comment cards? Do you have some?
Councilman, you may want to hear from the appellant.
Okay. Did the appellant fill out a public comment card? All right. Okay. All right. Christine Rowe?
I am the appellant, and I'd like to request before the time stops or starts, Honorable Chair, how long are you going to give me so I know how to approach this?
Well, ma'am, you're going to get more than 2 minutes for sure. So just state your case as concisely as you can.
Okay. The issue, I want to make it clear, I'm applying for this appeal not only as a resident within 50 feet of the project, but also to represent my neighbors who are unable to be here. I sent in a short summary this weekend to the deputies of all your council members. And also, I am a member of the West Hills Neighborhood Council. I am the Environment Committee Chair, the Public Health Chair, and I am on the Planning Committee, but I am recused. And the City Attorney did advise me on handle that recusal, and therefore, they approved the project against my recommendation. So I think the best thing, since there's only 1 minute left for me, is that I've given you.
Let me be very clear. You have more than 1 minute. You have more than 2 minutes.
Okay.
Just make a case as concisely as possible. We're giving you more than 2 minutes.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
I brought a bunch of pictures so that you would have an understanding of how this facility was already built, oversized for my community. My community was in place before they built it around 1986. So the large structure that you'll see, and I'm going to pass these around, is the JCC. And my house is real easy to find. It's the one with the orange tile roof. But so the people that are impacted the most are the Vicki neighbors and the Faust neighbors. I live on Faust, and a number of these people live on Vicki. And we have been working, this project has been going to the West Hills Neighborhood Council, to their Planning and Land Use Committee since last June. So we have worked very hard. So I'm going to pass these photos around. So basically my concerns are this, that I believe that you're going to hear wonderful things about having a private high school at this location. But the point is that you need, even though I'm recused as a neighborhood council member, I have to represent my community, and you need to understand the impact this project will have. And I believe they want to extend their existing footprint, and they've already got someone who has purchased 2 homes on Vicki there that abut the property, that are behind the garage, that they want to demolish to put in an extra driveway or parking area and whatever. So my primary concerns are, number one, that they not be allowed to expand beyond their current footprint should this project be approved. These Vicki houses, the West Hills Neighborhood Council did recommend that they not tear down these Vicki houses, and I believe that that would be a violation of our community plan, because you're supposed to support the existence of maintaining single-family residences. But there's a number of people that believe that everybody wants to buy that whole strip of land on Vicki, and possibly 2 houses next to mine. If they were to buy houses next to mine on Faust, they would be facing Van Owen, and they could put in parking right next door to my home. So the houses that we've lived in quiet cul-de-sacs for more than 20 years, the quality of life would change substantially. So no demolition of the Vicki houses. We want parking on site. They only have parking for about 280 parking places, and yet they have over 100 employees. So you're going to have 450 high school students that want to park there, and these students don't just live in the West Hills, Woodland Hills area. I think about 60% of them come from West LA, and maybe 20% from the West, so majority come on the 101 freeway. So it's not like you're providing to a local school. So we want no on-street parking for this. We have been good neighbors to the Jewish Community Center. We hate to see the center go. They just couldn't afford to stay there. And so they're taking over an existing Jewish community facility. So when the JCC would have big events, then the parking would be all over our neighborhood. So we want no school parking in our cul-de-sacs, and some of those conditions have been put into the documents in the past. We want to limit the number of students. Right now, they've requested 450. They have about 380 at their current location at Shomer Torah, so they are West Hills stakeholders now. But again, they have over 100 employees. So you're looking at about 550 people roughly right off the top going to be there. But they're asking for 700 on site during school hours. We can't see any justification for 700 people being there during school hours. We would like to limit it to about 550. And in fact, what I would like to do is give a provisional CUP that says, I know that Mr. Hendricks suggested that they come back in 2 years. I'd like to limit it to about 360, 380 of what they've got at Shomer Torah now to see how it works with the traffic, because where they are on Valley Circle now is a highway, but where they go to Van Owen, while it's considered a highway, it's really going to impact traffic on Van Owen more than it will on Valley Circle. I want to limit the hours of operation. This is a high school. At the Shomer Torah location, they don't have school hours on weekends. They are a conservative Jewish high school, and so normally they're closed for Shabbat. Some of my neighbors would like to have them closed on the weekend for Shabbat. I'm not going to push that hard. I'm going to say, well, they should have the opportunity to have testing on Saturdays if that's what's required of a good school. But on the other hand, the idea that they have hours of operation from 7 in the morning to 11 at night, almost 7 days a week, we would really feel like we'd like you to cut those hours back. There's no reason to go beyond 9 or 10 o'clock at night on a school night, because our houses, some of them really have maybe 6 feet.
If we can start wrapping up and concluding, please.
Okay. So the bottom line is one of the neighborhood council recommendations was a sound engineer for a buffer for sound on the Faust side in particular, but probably for Vicki as well. and that has not been addressed. We're concerned about them using Shadow Ranch Park to the exclusion of the other neighbors, and the traffic study, while it was done, they only did early morning hours of operation because at the time, LADOT was told that they were going to be gone by 3 o'clock, but in reality, if you read what their current hours are, that they're going to be going to 4 or 5 in the afternoon. So I felt that that traffic study was not only flawed, but did not understand the real impact. So I would really appreciate that you craft some conditions for us to protect the neighbors. And I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, ma'am. And I just want, just for the record, with your application, I think you hit all the major points in your appeal, so I want to make sure that was thorough. So thank you. Okay, we also have with us Councilmember Zine, and I believe that covers all the appellants. That's everyone that's on the appellant record. So we covered all the appellants. Councilmember Zine, I believe this is your district.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair and Mr. Englander. The request is more than reasonable. There's approximately 100 conditions placed on this. I'm familiar with the site. The Jewish Community Center has served the community for many years. And the school used to be there in a smaller portion. Dr. Powell, who's led that school to great accolades, needed a larger site, went to Shomrei Torah up on Valley Circle. There was some concern originally, traffic, etc. It's gone over extremely well. The temple, Shomrei Torah, is sad to see the school leaving because the school has benefited not only the students but the temple. And I'm very familiar with that entire area since I live within walking distance from that. We've got condition over condition, and we met with the applicants a number of times to make sure that this blended with the community. There's activities at the Jewish Community Center on Sundays, not on Saturdays. The center converting to a school is a proper location. It's on a major thoroughfare. We've got all types of conditions for the safety of the students, for the faculty, for the community, and the school needs to finally get a permanent home. It's like wandering through the desert for 40 years. It finally found a permanent home. You like that, Rabbi? I read that somewhere. So what we find now is some, you like that? We find some opposition because of some concerns about expansion, because of a negative impact in the community. The Jewish Community Center, which serves the community now, and I used to work out there in the morning with a number of other residents of the southwest San Fernando Valley. It's been a wonderful site. It's been a wonderful facility. It's served the community extremely well. So this particular location for a school serves ideal. The only ones who are going to be driving are the seniors in this high school. It's a private school. You have to pay to go there. And if you don't measure up, you do something wrong, then you're expelled, as we do with many private schools. So Dr. Powell, who I know, who's a scholar and who leads that school with high marks, and the parents that are here that have been advocating, doing fundraising for this school, it's a real community interest and community pride. Again, we've put in approximately 100 conditions to safeguard the neighborhood, and I think that with this addition to the community, it'll add to the educational environment, help the folks in the Southwest Valley that want to get that quality education, and I strongly support it. After going through a lot of reviews, a lot of discussion with the representatives from the school, with Dr. Powell, who is the man in charge of the school, so I give my gold star to what's been happening and the focus. And we're still going to protect the neighborhood. The conditions of the parking in the residential area are all covered. Every issue that's been discussed has been resolved. And there's no plan and there's no idea of taking the residential area and rezoning it and expanding the school. The school is going to serve the population. It's going to serve it well. We're going to have our future generations graduating from there. And if you go to that site, they've got a swimming pool, a full gymnasium. They're going to do some renovation to accommodate the additional classrooms. But it's a full-service facility. And the Jewish Community Center, which has been in place under the Federation for a number of years, they've had some issues along the way. This arrangement was made to have the school purchase it. They have made that purchase, and again, I give my strong support and recommendation that we approve it with all the conditions that we've established. There's no need to establish any further conditions. They are good neighbors. They'll work well with the community.
So, bottom line is you want to deny the appeal?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. We do have Linda Landau, the applicant. Like to come on up? Linda? You don't look like Linda. Linda Landau?
Mr. Chairman, Linda Landau.
Okay.
Thank you. I may be able to summarize on behalf of and we have cards for a lot of people. They don't all need to speak unless the committee wants to hear the testimony.
Oh, you are very good.
My name is Fred Gaines with the Law Office of Gaines and Stacy. We represent New Community Jewish High School. All of the people who are here on behalf to support the high school, will you stand to be recognized? With that, I wanted to just make a couple of comments. The head of the school, Dr. Powell, would like to make a comment. We have selected one parent who wants to make a comment, and then the rest, you have the cards if you'd like the additional testimony. We thank Councilman Zine and all the work of the community on this. We have had 22 community meetings on this over the last year with individual neighbors, with groups of neighbors, twice to the Neighborhood Council Land Use Committee, 3 times to the Neighborhood Council, which voted 15-0 to support the conditional use permit for the school at this location. We had a detailed Planning Commission hearing where we continued to tweak the conditions of approval, a unanimous approval by the Planning Commission, with the Planning Commission chair adding that, as you know, you're seeing a lot of schools. You're seeing charter schools and private schools trying to fit into almost every nook and cranny that they can fit into industrial buildings and other places. This is actually a campus with classrooms and an auditorium and an indoor athletic facility, gymnasium, and indoor pool that has been operating for 40 years, almost 40 years at this site. And the high school actually started there when they were up to 50 students 10 years ago, went off campus. They're in temporary buildings. They're in trailers at a synagogue about a mile away in West Hills, where they have not had problems in the community, where they've lived with their conditions. You don't have any complaints. And here's an opportunity to move them into this facility, make use of this facility, which, if it's not our school, it'll be another type of facility for these kind of community activities. The other thing that the school wants to do is attempt to maintain some of the community services that used to be at this facility, senior activities and other activities. So yes, at 4 o'clock when the students leave, we're not shutting the door. We want to continue to allow some of the things that have happened at this site for 40 years, seniors and classes and athletics and so forth. So with that, if there are any specific questions on the conditions, if you go through the conditions, you'll see that all of the issues have been addressed.
I do have a couple of questions.
Yes.
And this is based on my observations on the photos that were presented to the committee. There is perspectives where you can see some of the, I guess it's in the area where you have storage, and the ability to increase the screening so that there is enhanced visual from the neighbors to the site. Is that something that we could expand on and or improve? It would soften the look, just based on the pictures that I've seen here from certain angles. Unfortunately, I haven't been there to see it directly, but it just seems that if we could enhance the screening and the greening along the corridors or facing the neighbors, that would eliminate the sight of the pipes, if you will, the pipes going up the buildings, and or where you have your storage or you have your I guess it's the shipping and receiving area. Those are minor, but I think it speaks to the sense of being a good neighbor, a better neighbor. I'm not saying you're a bad neighbor. It just enhances, just based on what I see in the photos, and I can show that to you folks later. But I believe those are fundamental improvements along with all the other conditions that are there. So,
what I was going to say was that, first of all, one of the advantages we have here is we have a lot of mature landscaping. Across the back, which is the south side, we have a row of mature trees. On the west side, there's a lot of mature, tall landscaping that's created a buffer. The buffer has some gaps in it on the east side. We have a landscape plan to fix that, and that plan has been developed we actually brought the landscape architect out to the homeowners on that street on the east side to talk about what types of trees they would like to see there. This is, I'm happy to show you, this is, for example, some of the studies that we've already done to show the types of landscaping that's intended on that side. So we've been very carefully going literally side by side around to the type of screening that we can provide, and that is part of the conditions of the landscape plan of this approval.
Great. That was the only observation I had based on the pictures I just viewed right now, so that's great. Okay. So it's the service area, the pipes are running along the building, they'll be covered. I think it goes a long way.
The two speakers I'd ask is
please,
Dr. Powell,
have them come on up,
who's the head of the school, and Ms. Nelson, and then if you have other questions or want to hear from other speakers.
No, I thank you for the two speakers. Come on up. That saved us about a good many cars. Otherwise, we would have been here till the Kings game. No, just kidding.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for hearing our presentation. My name is Dr. Bruce Powell. I live in Woodland Hills, about 2 miles from the school. It's a great commute for me. I've been 42 years in education in the city of Los Angeles, serving the children of Los Angeles, both in the public schools. Started my career at Virgil Junior High School, and had a wonderful several years there. The concept of our school is all values-based. We have kids there. Hopefully it's eventually 450 kids. We're about 360 now, who learn deep American and Jewish values of justice and righteousness and so on. The kids have generated 25 different committees, 20 of which are all about civic engagement and charity. The program is highly academic. Arts, athletics, and so forth. The kids spend very little time getting into trouble, a tremendous amount of time trying to get into college, because it is a college preparatory school. We have a record of trust in our community, and that's the bottom line. We have 8 years on the current site. Will be 9 years by the time we exit that site. Absolute a problem-free relationship with our neighbors. We made that commitment. We had 22 conditions when we went into that site. We fulfilled every single condition. There have been issues. We answer those issues within 24 hours, and they are solved. We've made this commitment to the community where we're moving in. I've lived in that community my entire adult life. So it's people I'm going to run into in Trader Joe's, and I don't want to be ashamed. All right, and that ultimately is the bottom line. So, also in terms of executing the plan, we have tremendous relationships with our parents and our kids. They will do what we ask them to do. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Hi. My name is Leslie Nelson, and I'm a neighbor of New Community Jewish High School. I live on Stonegate, which runs along the side of Shomrei Torah. I was apprehensive when I first found out New Jew was moving in. I was worried about an increase in traffic as well as kids hanging out on Stonegate or at the park at the bottom of our hill. Yes, traffic did increase, but only for a short time in the morning and a little in the afternoon. And the only kids I've ever seen walking on our street are the 4 students who live in the neighborhood. For the first few years, I didn't notice any cars turning on Stonegate, but on about the 4th year, cars began making U-turns on the street. I immediately pulled my car over and spoke to the new Jew representative standing at the corner. He promised to handle it and get back to me. By the end of that day, David Marcus called me to let me know they had notified the entire student body and emailed the parents, making it clear it was unacceptable. It took us a few weeks working together to come up with a plan that would protect our neighborhood while helping to alleviate the line of people making left-hand turns on campus. Even during that time, they watched like hawks to make sure nobody was using our street again. Is New Jew perfect? No. But are they a school that cares about their community and stands by the commitment to protect the neighbor's privacy and quality of life? Absolutely. Other than a little traffic, the campus is self-contained. There's never any overflow onto the sidewalk or noise that causes any disruption to our neighborhood. Truthfully, they're one of the most considerate neighbors a community could ask for. I have a daughter currently in public school, and my son went to public school through middle school. However, when he came home halfway through 8th grade and said he was done with school because the kids were out of control, we knew it was time for a change. Due to the way NUJU responded to our concerns as neighbors, our son is now in his second year at the school. My life would be a lot easier if the school were to stay at Shomer Torah. However, it's not about me. New Community Jewish High School deserves a place to call home. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next group, and again, thank you all those that wrote out cards and are willing to allow for the two speakers to represent you. Our next group is Bruce Rowe, Lori Yalom, and Sally Neely. Mr. Rowe?
Thank you, Bruce Rowe. And thank you for listening to us. I live across the street on the east side in a cul-de-sac. So our front door faces their east wall, and we're about 50 feet away from them. We're right outside that loading dock that you were talking about. First of all, when they had a dramatic rise of people who were for the program, about 40% of those people work for the school. That's my estimate. So I just want to put that in perspective. These are people who work for the school, at least a lot of them are. Now, at the current school, their hours for the school itself is till 5:30. I see no reason that they have to go until 11 o'clock. And even the community center does not go to 11 o'clock. So you're most likely going to approve this project, but I think that you should tick back the hours from 11 to 9 or 10. Currently, I believe it's 10 o'clock at the community center. The seniors that used to go there now have found a new home, so there's probably not going to be too many seniors going there. They're going to North Hollywood, I believe. Northridge, I'm sorry. We would like to see them limit the students to the 370 that they currently have, 370, 380, for a year, and then come back and see how that works out on all the things. We do believe that there should be noise buffers and require even a higher wall in Faust facing our house. And I guess that's about all. We're still concerned with noise, traffic, and parking. The parking study I do not think was effective or... Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Our next speaker, Laura Yalom and Sally Neely. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon. My name's Laura Yalom. I'm a neighbor on Vicki Avenue. I'm speaking for myself.
Can you read it? Can you speak into the microphone? I can hear you a lot better.
I'm speaking for myself and 7 of my neighbors that have signed this, what I'm going to say. I'm proud to call Vicki Avenue our quiet neighborhood home for 17 years. We are open to having the new Jewish Community High School next door move into our street, however, and be a good neighbor. However, after reviewing the school's April 10th proposal, we do still have serious concerns about some of the issues, namely that will negatively affect the quality of our life. We've met several times with Ira and David, Dr. Powell and Linda, and other committees to try to express our concerns as neighbors and ask for reasonable changes. And some of the concessions were made, but several others were not. It just seems to us at this point that the city council and the planning, whatever the high school asks for, they get. And our concerns are not being included in the CUP. Number one, our concern is the homes on Vicki Avenue, 6720 and 6726. Having a high school at the JCC may be a good neighbor, but tearing down homes on a cul-de-sac of 14 is not and never will be something that will make them a good neighbor. We beg the city council and city planning to protect our neighborhood and see that these 2 homes remain residential homes. I have pictures of the 2 homes they plan to tear down in here. The other 2 things, traffic and parking. Volunteers controlling traffic, we appreciate that, but it's not enough to mitigate the traffic problems that 700 people are going to bring. We are dealing with major parking problems now from the Shadow Ranch Park and allowing 700 more people on the weekends.
So I was trying to get folks to look at their letters so they can get to their point, but do you want to finish?
What we'd like to add to the CUP is requiring that all parking and traffic restrictions also apply to community center patrons.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you. Our next speaker, Salamili.
Can I submit?
Yes. I see another nice letter there. You want to just get to the point.
I live at 6711 Vicki. I've lived there since '84. And I'm absolutely blown away that you guys are spending 4 years to figure out the thing for a telephone cellular tower. And you're going to let the school move in and tear down 2 of our houses on our block, which will impact us every day of our life. And
ma'am, the 4 years.
Throw this stuff away. I have absolutely. I'm like a cell phone tower gets more time than we do. I mean, we want the school there. The school will be fine if it's just the school. How are they going to control the other parking? I realize that they got their parking thing figured out, but what about their guests or the committee? We would like it to just be the school. The JCC, they kicked them out. They found a new home. Let's just have it the school for a couple years and then see what happens. They're not going to be able to control if they're going to have like a bridge thing. They're not going to control the people that park on our street. And when they first started, they were going to be closed for Shabbat. And we said, the JCC did a lot of things that they weren't going to do and stuff, but then they did it anyway. And then they said, but that's not us because we're a higher power and all this kind of stuff. And now they're open for Shabbat. And so they're already changing their mind on things. So how are we supposed to trust them when they're already not doing what they said they were going to do from the beginning? So I think that they should be closed for Shabbat as it was originally proposed, and I think they should have to wait a couple years before they allow other activities besides the school. I think the school is enough for now. That's it.
I appreciate your opinion.
I have 10 more minutes, and I never go.
You freaked me out. That was a long pause.
Anyway, I really am upset about that. You think more about a cell tower than you do about a school that's going to be there every day of our lives.
Can I share something with you on that point?
Yes.
I'm not sure you want to hear this, but the fact is, laws change. And it takes time to understand what the courts dictate.
Right.
So our laws respond to what is granted to us by the federal laws and the state laws.
Right.
So it hasn't been 4 years. This issue's been around for almost 15 years.
With the cell towers?
Cell tower issues have been around that long.
Down 2 beautiful homes out of 14 homes.
I think you missed my point.
No, I don't miss you. I think you missed my point.
No, not at all. I understand what you're saying.
We don't.
We as legislators, we respond to federal and state law, and it's never clear cut and clean as we'd like it to be, and we progress according to the courts. So, it's taken the courts this long.
So our homes mean nothing.
No, I didn't say that.
What did you say?
What I just said.
That you're not going to let them tear down the 2
No, I didn't say that either.
Oh.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Neely. Thank you very much. She's good. Therese Lee. Therese Lee. No, I'm sorry, ma'am. We closed the comment. Okay, so that's all the public comment. Councilman Zion. Not too long.
Just on clarification, number 21, Vicki Avenue homes, the 2 homes located at 6720 and 6726 Vicki Avenue, which are included in the conditional use permit project site, shall not be demolished for a minimum of 3 years following the issuance of certificate of occupancy of this application. In the event the school decides to demolish the homes, the school shall apply for the appropriate entitlement application for submittal to the city to amend, modify, or revise the terms of this grant. The school shall provide the neighboring community with reasonable notice before filing that application with the city of Los Angeles. This is volunteered. It's a volunteered condition by the applicant. So if they want to tear those homes down, there's a whole process they need to proceed with. It can't just be done because at a whim they want to tear down homes. So I just wanted a point of clarification on that.
So we do value homes more than cell towers.
Exactly, we do.
Okay, good. All right.
That's another good point.
Ms. Neely, I hope you heard that. Okay. So that being said, and should I announce who ends up with this district area? No, okay, all right. We'll leave it alone. Madam Attorney.
Terry Kaufman, Macias City Attorney's Office. Assuming that the committee is going to recommend approval, the city attorney is recommending that you delete condition AF, which is the school shall make the site available for city meetings. Delete that for legal reasons. If the school wants to enter into private agreement with different groups, neighborhood council or whatever, that's between them, but this condition is improper and needs to be deleted.
Okay, so we will move to deny the appeal with the recommended changes as dictated by the city attorney's observations on the language of the report. Yes?
I've got questions as well.
Oh, you have questions. Okay, before we move then, I thought we were ready to go.
I know.
All right, Mitch, go for it.
I do have some questions. And I was going to make the recommendation that we eliminate AF because it does say available for city meetings, and I just wanted to state on the record, have you met some of the city officials in the city? Do you really want them? No, okay. But going back, just kidding. Going back to, for the record, kidding on the record. Okay. Let me just start off by saying that first of all, it's unfortunate that one of the most difficult things to ever approve in a city, in a community, in a neighborhood is a school. We spend more time and more effort struggling and working with and compromising and conditioning private schools than almost anything else. We don't have a lot of, obviously, jails that are proposed to be built in our community. I think those would be a little more complicated. But schools, churches, and synagogues are the hardest thing because everybody wants them and nobody wants them next to them. We talked about cell towers. We were talking about that earlier. Everybody needs them, and nobody wants them. And then we get complaints all the time that their phone doesn't work from their home, but they don't want the cell tower across the street. And it's the same thing with schools and churches and synagogues. We all know that they are a tremendous community benefit, and we all know that we need choices with schools, and we need choices with churches and synagogues, and enough is never enough. And they all bring impacts, and those are the impacts we've got to deal with. And so they're very difficult, they're very complicated, they're very controversial, and it's one of the most difficult things we have. On the other side of that, one of the frustrating things from our perspective is that public schools, we wouldn't be sitting here if it were a public school. You wouldn't have any of these conditions on here because we don't have a seat at the table with public schools. They build it, and these conditions, we hope they listen to our recommendations, but we have no authority to speak of with public schools at all. We don't. Because they don't fall under our purview or jurisdiction. And so they put them almost anywhere, and they don't have these kinds of conditions. You get a lot more conditions and protections for the community with a private school than you do a public school. And who ends up paying for that is we all do, because ultimately it's not just tuition that pays for it. So there's a lot of issues that we've got to deal with. Having said all that, I've got some serious concerns. I've actually sat down over the years, and while I'm new on the council, fairly, I'll be in office a year, July 1st. No birthday cakes required, really. But the gratitude is enough, but I appreciate it. I know Mr. Reyes wanted to throw me a surprise party, and it's really not necessary, but I do thank you for the thought.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But I have had the opportunity over the years to sit down with many of private schools and try to work out conditions in my previous capacity, and it's very difficult, and you don't know what's going to work and what's not. But we always have the fear that once we approve it, we're done, we're stuck. You can't open it again. And so one of the things that this does have here, though, I wanted to point out is condition 5 which is the plan approval. And it says here that the applicant shall file a plan approval in 24 months of the issuance of the certificate of occupancy for review of condition compliance and to modify, delete, and or add conditions as may be warranted. Now, what that means is that they'll be operational for 2 years, and all of these conditions will come back to see if they're adhering to them, if they're working, if they need to be modified. I've started looking at, for example, condition 22, A, B, C, and D of all the traffic rules. And one of my first concerns right off the top was that these apply to the school but not the community center. They should be for both, I would think. I don't know why you would have these conditions on here for the school to keep clear, don't block Vicki Street, and all of these other things, drive U-turns on Sale Avenue, all of these things I would think should adhere to both. I don't know if that's a simple modification or not, but these are the things that we can see if they're working or not. If you turn to the original conditions that were filed under plan approval on number 5, it said that the applicant shall file the plan approval in 4 years of the issuance of a C of O. So somewhere along the lines that I caught this is that somebody said, well, wait a minute. The community, I would give credit to the councilman, but it's Zion, so I'm going to give the credit for the community, probably caught this and said, we want to make sure, all kidding aside, this guy does his homework, he's tenacious. I want to make sure that they're actually following the rules and we're not going to wait 4 years to get there. I want to make sure that we can protect the community and we're not going to wait around for 4 years. Also, there was an issue that I caught as well, because I do my homework, that says here that homes were going to be possibly torn down in 3 years after the C of O. Well, that's fascinating because the conditions then don't open for another 4 years. So now the homes are gone, and you can be completely out of whack and not following any of the rules. Well, now with this modification, this comes back in 24 months and 2 years before the homes are possibly touched. This is opened up again to make sure they're in compliance. So this is really actually well thought out from if you watch what happened at the beginning of the process and the conditions to where it's at today, and which I've clearly looked at. Further, we have other things that I'm also deeply concerned about, which are the hours of operation, because this is not a school. This is a school that's going to be going till 11 o'clock at night, every night, the way that it's written now. It says here, there's some terminology that limited community center services shall be permitted. I don't know what that means. There's not a list here of what types. It says limited. The subject site shall not be rented as a banquet facility, hall, or for weddings and parties, bar, bat mitzvahs, or for similar events. Rented is a term I would change that to use instead of rented, because what happens if they use it for free? So I'm just going through this, and I've got a lot of questions and concerns, but I will tell you the one thing that I would not approve or sit here and bless is 4 years, is waiting 4 years to see if they've made it, to see if they've done it, to see if they're in compliance. That double secret probation period of 2 years makes a lot of sense. It gives them the opportunity, because there's always growing pains as well. So they'll start off in the first couple of months and make mistakes. They've got to train and teach and inform and educate parents, which are much more tougher to educate than students, to change their behaviors and be good neighbors and quiet during drop-off and pickup, and make sure that they're wearing their orange vests and they put the cones out and all those things that just take some time to iron out. So I get all that. I'm a parent too, so I understand these things. And the reason I go in through all of these details and issues and concerns is that I support it because it has been well thought out in the fact that it comes back to us in 2 years. There's no way I would support this in 4. The other reason that I spend so much time going through and explaining this and is because on July 1st, this will also be my district. And so, and while we've had a great steward in Councilman Zine, who's I got to tell you, I got some big shoes to fill. And at least his barbers in his district will be a little happier. They'll be spending some more money than he does, but I've got some big shoes to fill. And
you're on a roll.
Ready to do.
You're on a roll.
Well, if he had a mic, he'd be hitting me back.
I got to know. I actually wanted time for rebuttal.
Oh, we got rebuttal? All those things I said about Mr. Zine. And there's another interest I have in this, and it's not just that. And it's that I grew up here, and the JCC was not here when I grew up either. By the way, it was down the street, which is now a church at the old JCC site at Shoup and Van Owen. And that church used to be a big open field, and the big open field with the tire swing in the back, it was an old barn house that sat there. And that's where I grew up. And I don't say I grew up there. I mean, I literally, not figuratively and not down the street. I grew up at that site. That was the place that I grew up, from a single mom having to drop me off so somebody can watch me while she had to work 3 jobs, was at that location. I know this area well. I know the programs well. I know Shadow Ranch Park well, extremely well. Every nook and cranny of the place. So, this is near and dear to my heart in protecting this community, and I just wanted to let you guys know that as well. And I support the school. I know a lot of the parents. I know the players that are involved. I support everything Councilman Zine has done, because he has really thought this out well from the beginning, at the time this was implemented, on the conditions to where we're at today. And then the whole idea that this comes back to us. And I know full well that this community is going to have both eyes open for the next 24 months, working closely with the school to adhere to and ensure that the protections are strictly enforced. And so I will say, give them a couple months, give them that growing pain to get started, but not that much. Soon after they should be up to speed. But I will be there throughout this process and not abandon it. So I just wanted to put all that out the record, and I appreciate the extra time you've given me on this.
So, Councilor, you want to go with the recommendation?
Yes, and that will be to eliminate AF as well.
Right.
Yes.
And all the other observations, you're going to wait 2 years.
Yes.
Okay, so we're not going to rent, we're going to use. We're going to rent. Okay, sorry. All right, so that will be the action of this committee, that we follow the recommendation with the stated condition as articulated by the city attorney. And that's a yes, Councilmember Guzar. All right, so that is the action of this committee. And
Deny the appeal.
Deny the appeal with the conditions as stated. Anything else, Roberto?
Public comment?
Anybody have a public comment? Mr. Gaines? Linda? Gaines?
Listening to your
public comment, because this item is
public
on.
comment.
Public comment.
Listening to your discussion on the cell tower, putting my hat on as Mayor Pro Tem of the City of Calabasas, we've spent the last year developing a new cell tower ordinance. We spent a lot of money on legal opinions on how far you could go aesthetically. We dealt with some of the issues, including bonding for abandonment and notice distances and so forth. So we have our second reading at the end of June.
Great.
And I would certainly offer to you or anyone at the city to share the materials that we've done and the interest of the things that we've done. So I just offer that to you.
I appreciate it, Mr. Gaines, and I know the Calabasas is in good hands. Thank you, sir. All right. So that is the end of this committee. Thank you very much. Have a great evening.